What up, everybody? Davey D hanging out with you this morning. And there's a lot I want to talk to you about. And first, I'm proud to have a good friend and somebody who y'all should know. It is Sergeant Ron Stallworth, a 32-year veteran of law enforcement, currently serving as the Gang Intelligence Coordinator for the Utah Department of Public Safety's Division of Investigations. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. He's the author of several books, but this is one that is now out. It's called Bringing the Noise, and it's a culmination of a couple of books, shrunk down a little, but it really underscores his expertise and insights into what people commonly call gangster rap, and we want to talk to him a little bit about that later on. He's somebody who's testified before Congress, the Senate, and is definitely a go-to guy in law enforcement when they want to really understand the intricacies of this music and its impact on society, and what are some of the root causes that have driven this music. And he does a pretty thorough job, more thorough than most of the books I've come across. So we will talk to him about that. But I really got a chance to know of Ron Stallworth a few years ago when he retired. And that was because there was an article that appeared in the local newspaper out of Salt Lake City that talked about his tenure as an investigative law enforcement operative. I hope that's the right word. But he infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan. And not only did he infiltrate them, but he also got a card from the leader, David Duke, at that time. And if you look at Mr. Stallworth, he's about my complexion. And it was something out of Dave Chappelle's skit 20 years before Dave Chappelle came up with it. And so I wanted to talk to him about it because even though it's funny on the surface and he can tell you how he was able to infiltrate it, what was very serious, and the reason why I'm bringing it up, is because where he was able to catch these folks was they were recruiting from the military. And in the age right now of Trayvon Martin and vigilanteism on the rise, we just saw what happened in Tulsa. We know what's going on in Arizona. We have this whole thing about neighborhood watches, and there's this whole seed and this whole current. Oh, wait a second. This is the card. If you could zoom in right there, that's the card from the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, signed by David Duke and given to Sergeant Ron Stallworth, who he didn't realize had infiltrated his organization. So there you go. Wow. So this is what a Klan card looks like. Wow. So we need to talk. I wanted to, first of all, welcome you to the show, Ron. And I wanted to start off with this thing about Trayvon Martin and just this whole rise of vigilanteism. The fact that, back in the early 80s, late 70s, that you came across the Klan when they were recruiting from the military to get people to join should be something that causes alarm. And because, one, we don't know if that's ever stopped. I would imagine it's continued. And if so, then maybe this current wave of vigilanteism from Katrina to Jena 6 to Tulsa recently, and even in Florida, might be something we need to further look at. And I wanted to get your thoughts on a little bit of that.
Yeah. Before I move on, I'm the former Gang Intelligence Coordinator.
Former. That's right. Okay.
Not
now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the issues of the Klan, Jena 6, Katrina, all of that, my response is we need to constantly stay vigilant to groups such as this and activities such as that, because they never stop. They never cease. Every time we let our guard down, every time we relax, every time we lose our vigilance, these activities and these groups tend to rise. And it's when we let our guard down that they kind of pounce upon us, and they go off on their tangent, and we're caught more or less with our pants down. And my suggestion is that we should always stay vigilant to the activities that these groups are engaged in. Unfortunately, we never take them seriously. I can remember when I did my investigation way back, it started in 1978, and it went into, it lasted almost a year, into 1979. I was laughed at by some of the people in my organization, my police department. They thought it was funny. Ku Klux Klan in this day and age, nobody took it seriously. And I literally had to fight tooth and nail within the Colorado Springs Police Department for them to take me seriously and to give me the manpower and support, financial support, the resource support that I needed in order to conduct that investigation.
Well, it was a landmark investigation, and maybe you could share with us, because I'm sure people are looking and they're going, how did a black man infiltrate the Klan? You know, because we've seen the Dave Chappelle skits, and people have laughed at it where there's a black dude who's, you know, all up in there. But you were very stealthy about it, and they alluded, it was pretty serious, the fact that they were recruiting from the military. So maybe you could talk about that.
It's funny you ask. On May 10th through the 13th, I'm going to be in Colorado Springs. The Retired Police Association for Colorado Springs has invited me to address, is actually being sponsored by the African American police officers who have retired from that department. And they've invited me back to talk about an unknown chapter within the department. The Colorado Springs public does not know this story because it's never been talked about in public. I was basically ordered to destroy the files of that investigation, which I never did.
Of the Klan?
The entire investigation, the police reports, my chief at that time ordered me to destroy those files, those reports, when I was ordered to stop that investigation. And I basically took those reports home with me, and I have them to this day because I recognize the significance of what I had done. It's the only documentation of that investigation that exists, and I have it at my house today. So wow. That story has never been told to the Colorado Springs public, and I've been asked to come back and talk about it. So on Saturday, May 12th, I am appearing in Colorado Springs and telling that story publicly for the first time.
Okay.
So actually, you folks here in California have heard it before they have.
Right, right.
But
well, we talked about it a couple of years ago.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
But for a lot of people that are now watching in different parts, maybe you can share with us some of the highlights of it.
I was working in the intelligence section of the Colorado Springs Police Department. Intelligence and officers, basically, their job is to know any and everything that goes on in terms of so-called subversive groups. Whatever subversive group may exist in a particular community, they're supposed to know about them, stay on top of their activities, and do anything that they can to quell the spread of those activities. If they branch off into criminal activities, they're supposed to stop them. And I was reading the newspaper one day, and I saw an ad in the classifieds that said, Ku Klux Klan, for information, call. And there was a number. So I picked up the phone, and I called the number. And unbeknownst to me, a guy answered the phone. I wasn't expecting that. And he answered the phone, and I told him I had seen his ad and said I was interested. He asked me who I was, and I quickly blurted out my real name. I hadn't thought that far ahead. And he asked me why I wanted to know about the Klan. And I proceeded to tell him that I was a white male and that I wanted to join because my sister was white and my sister was dating a black man, except I didn't say black. I used the so-called N-word, which I don't like using that term. I think my personal opinion is using such euphemisms such as N-word. I think it detracts from the true nature of what that word stands for, what its historical meaning is, and the true impact of what that word has always done in terms of us as a people, and what its meaning to this nation as a whole has always represented.
Right.
But for the sake of our audience, I will detract from using it. Anyway, I said that I was a black man, and a white man. My sister was dating a black man, and that that I wanted to join because it really irritated and bothered me that she was in the embrace of a black man. And I wanted to do something to try to impact that issue. So he said, "You're just the kind of man we want to have with us." I also threw out a few more derogatory terms like negative references to Hispanics, to Jews, to any other ethnic groups that you can imagine. I threw them all out there. In other words, I used the language of hate.
Right.
This is what they wanted to hear. I threw it all out there, and this is what it worked because he was drawn to it. He immediately said he wanted to meet with me. I hadn't thought that far ahead, by the way. So he asked to meet with me. I agreed to meet with him that evening. He then said, "What do you look like? How will I know? How will I recognize you?" Again, I hadn't thought that far ahead. So I described a white officer who worked in the narcotics section of my department, who was about my height, my weight. Only difference was he was white. And I told him that this white officer would be at this location. I told him how he would dress. I knew how he typically came to work. And we arranged to meet that night. And we arranged to meet at a bar that was near Fort Carson, Colorado, which wasn't too far from where this guy said he lived. Turns out the guy I was talking to on the phone was a sergeant in the Army stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado.
Wow.
So I then had to...
Looking for the Klan.
He was
recruiting for the Klan.
Recruiting for the Klan. He told me on the phone his title was local organizer. That's how he referred to himself, the local organizer for the Klan. So I then had to go to my chief of police and get his authorization to use this officer because the lieutenant for the narcotics division, again, did not want to give me the use of this officer. He thought it was a joke and didn't want to support me. I had to get the chief's permission to overrule the lieutenant. And I got that, and then we then wired the officer up for sound so that I could listen to the conversation. And then I sent the officer in posing as me. I told the officer what my conversation was on the phone, told him what I wanted him to accomplish, which was to get all of the literature he could get, identify anybody that was going to be present, basically determine what their goals and intent was, and then bring it back to me. And that's what we did. I sent him to the location. He went to this particular bar where we were supposed to meet him. He met one guy. The guy confirmed that he was, in fact, Ron Stallworth, because what I had done was gave this officer all of my identification minus the picture.
Right.
Okay, I gave him a library card. I gave him a credit card. I still had my temporary Colorado driver's permit, which didn't have any picture of me. And I gave him all that, and he showed it to him. And then he told the guy who I referred to as the white Ron Stallworth, he then told him to get in his car and follow him to a second bar that was about 2 miles down the highway. And in that second bar was the local organizer and about, I think, 4 other people who were all members of the Klan, and they were all armed. Everybody was carrying firearms.
Wow.
The significance of that was back in 1978, there was no such thing as concealed firearm permits. So all of these people were illegally armed at that time, time period. They were all carrying either 45s or 38s. There were a couple of 9mm, as I recall, but they were all illegally armed for that time period. And of the 5 people that were present, I believe 3 or 4 of them were all military. So he met with them, he got literature from them, and they told him basically that they were going to plan a couple of activities. One, they wanted to blow up gay bars. We had at that time 2 gay bars in Colorado Springs. They wanted to blow them up. And the other thing they were planning was what they called a white people's Christmas. They wanted to gather, put food care packages together for the poor white people in Colorado Springs, which was very noble, by the way. Nothing wrong with that. But they wanted to get food packages together for Christmas and present it to the poor white people in Colorado Springs. And that was their 2 projects that they wanted to do.
Wow. So, eventually, you wound up meeting Dave Duke, and, and folks got caught, infiltrating NORAD and all these other things. How did this, did they ever catch on to you? And did Dave Duke ever know, who you were? And you got a card from him.
Well, here's how that came about. They, by the way, in terms of the blowing up of the gay bars, the local organizer, it turned out his job in the Army was ordnance. He was an ordnance specialist, which ordnance is explosives.
Right.
So he had access to explosives in his job in the military, and that was significant. Over time, they told the white Ron Stallworth, they told him before he could participate in any activities, he had to first become a full-fledged member. So when he came back to the office that night, I took a photo, snapped a photo of him. I got $25 of city money, which was the membership fee. I attached the photo and the got a money order with the money. And I filled out the application with my name and the fake post office box that we had, and mailed it in to David Duke down in Metairie, Louisiana, which is a suburb of New Orleans. And I basically submitted my application to the KKK. It was supposed to come back within a couple of weeks, and I didn't get it. And I'm the type of person that I don't believe in dealing with people at the bottom or in the middle. I go straight to the top.
Right.
And after about 3 weeks, when I didn't get my membership card, I called down and straight to the headquarters, and lo and behold, David Duke answered the phone. So I called, and this voice answered the phone. I explained that I was a member of the new chapter in Colorado Springs, but I wanted to participate in the activities and couldn't do so without my membership, and is there any way he could help me out? And he said, let me check. And I said, oh, do you mind telling me who this is? And he says, well, this is David Duke. I said, the David Duke? He said, yeah. I said, the David Duke of the Ku Klux Klan? He said, yeah. I said, the Grand Wizard? He said, yeah. I said, Mr. Duke? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm honored to meet you. I'm Ron Stallworth, one of the new Klan members down in Colorado Springs. He said, oh, I saw your name just the other day. Hold on a second. And I could hear it ruffling in the papers, and he said, here it is right here. He said, I'll type it up myself. So that card I just showed you, David Duke actually typed it up himself, put it in the mail to me. And in that, when it came in the mail, I also got a membership certificate that certifies me as a member of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan with David Duke's certificate, with David Duke's signature.
Right.
That certificate was framed by me. It hung in my office the last 15 years of my career with the Department of Public Safety. And I still have it at home framed.
But they wanted you to destroy those files.
My chief of police, when we ended this investigation about a year later, the reason this investigation ended was because I was asked, the guy who was the local organizer was getting out of the Army, and they needed a new local organizer. He called me on the phone one day, and we talked, and he explained he was getting out of the Army, and he said, we need a new organizer. He said, and I'm recommending you, Ron Stallworth, to be the new local organizer because you've been a good, loyal Klansman, and I think you would be a good one to take over. And he said, we, the other membership, have talked about it, and it's basically a done deal.
Did they do any illegal activities that people got busted on, or did they do anything that you became privy to that you were able to stop or prevent? Or
they didn't do anything illegal. We were monitoring in terms of their talk about wanting to bomb the gay bars. It was all talk.
Okay.
But we were very concerned because they had access via him. They were capable of doing it. So we were very concerned about that, but it never came to fruition. They were always armed. Whenever they held meetings, they were always armed. Again, this was illegal during that time period.
Right.
So we were concerned about that. We could have busted them at any time for that alone, but we were intelligence gathering. We were monitoring their activities, but we weren't concerned at the time about taking the criminal action of busting them.
Right.
We wanted to ring in a big net, so to speak, because they were tied in with all the other right-wing subversive groups that existed in Colorado Springs. There were several others.
Right.
And
well, Colorado, even to this day, was one of the places where they found people that had threatened to assassinate the president, Obama, a couple of years ago.
Colorado, since I left in 1980, Colorado has gotten more right-wing than it was back then.
Wow.
Much more right-wing. Back then, it was back then it had its problems. It's much worse now, in my opinion. But we knew that the Klan group was tied into other right-wing groups back then, and we were trying to cast a wide net to see what all it would shape up.
Right.
So we weren't concerned about making any arrests for any minor things. So we weren't focused on busting them for a firearms violation, which would have been very minor at the time. What we did prevent, they were planning on several cross burnings. I knew about the cross burnings because I was talking to them on the phone about it. They were telling me when they were planning the cross burnings, what location, how big the crosses were. Right. I was invited to the cross burning. I couldn't participate as a cop. I couldn't go that far because I would have been crossing the line.
Right.
So every time they planned the cross burnings, I would get all the particular details from them over the phone, and then I would alert all of our my officers, and then we would saturate the area with extra patrol cars. During the entire year we had this investigation, not one cross was ever burned because I knew about it. We had the area that they were going to burn the cross saturated with patrol cars, and as they were driving to the location, they would run into our saturated area, and they never could figure out why there were so many police cars cruising the area. It scared them off.
Right.
And then they would call me, or I'd talk to them on the phone and ask them, well, how'd it go? Well, we didn't do it because, there were so many cops there and everything else. And they did this, I think, 3 times they planned cross burnings, and 3 times they called it off because there were just too many cops. And we all laughed in the office,
Right.
But we prevented cross burnings. Colorado Springs was not terrorized by any cross burnings during the year we had this investigation.
If you're just tuning in on radio or watching, we're talking with former Sergeant Ron Stallworth. We're starting off talking about Trayvon and vigilantism and his tenure of infiltrating the Klan at once upon a time. You're concerned about this being in the military, and the reason why I wanted to ask you these questions and go back into time is looking at this current tone in the country where people feel like, either now legally because of stand your ground laws, or just, in Arizona where people are joining these paramilitary groups like the Minutemen and, talking about, we suspect you of not being here legally, and really bringing it back to a vigilante type of climate. Your thoughts on that, and especially when you have these types of groups that have been in the military and what have you?
I think America should be very concerned, especially people of color, with the tone that this country has undergone since the president took office. Clearly there is an agenda aimed at President Obama, and it's frightening to see where we have come. Me being a product of the 60s, I see us being back in the 60s right now.
In what sense?
In the sense that the Republican agenda, the conservative agenda that exists right now, I see it being right around the same as it was right around 1964 or so under when Barry Goldwater was running for president. I think that the country has taken a major step backwards, and it's almost like deja vu for someone like me who lived during that time period. It's almost like deja vu in terms of what the rhetoric that I'm hearing and some of the things that I am seeing occurring around the country right now in terms of Arizona, the Trayvon Martin thing. It's downright scary, to be honest with you. And I feel for the president, and every time I hear the criticism that's going on with the right-wing groups that are attacking him, and then some of the progressive groups that are attacking him, I feel for him in the sense that literally he is out there, for all intents and purposes, he's by himself absorbing all of this criticism and attack, and recognizing that he's carrying the weight on his shoulders alone in terms of these attacks that are going on against him, because he's the first. He literally is the first.
Well, one might argue that, where he has an attorney general, and you were able to, initiate an investigation against the Klan, one would think that he would be able to do that similarly, since he's president. He should be able to, reach out and start these types of investigations, not just because the attacks are on him, but because we see these attacks on people of color all throughout the country.
Not necessarily so, because as president, he can't initiate an investigation. He can direct his attorney general to check into things, to look into them, but he can't order. He can tell his attorney general to go check into something, but he can't order the attorney general to go do certain things.
Even in the age of the Patriot Act and all that?
Define constitutional line between how far he can go in terms of the Patriot Act. And like I said, there's a lot of constitutional issues, and he has to be very careful. Plus, from Obama's standpoint, he's looking at the fact that being the first black president, everybody is pointing to the fact that he's automatically going to run and play the race card. That's why I say he's walking a fine line, and it's a very delicate line that he's traveling.
So if we can't depend upon him to do that, what should folks, for example, who are in Tulsa, seeing that you have this guy driving around in a truck shooting 5, 6 black people, 3 of them dying, what do we do in the age of the George Zimmermans or the folks that shot up, I forget the lady's name who shot up the Latino family down in Arizona? When we have that, do we pick up our own arms, or what do you see?
We have to have investigations going on, but what I'm saying is not necessarily it's not necessarily something that the president is engaged in. We have city police departments, sheriff's departments that should be investigating these things. We have state attorney generals that should be initiating investigations. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then after these investigations are either going on or have failed to go on, then that's when the Attorney General of the United States should be getting involved. The Attorney General doesn't necessarily jump in at the first sign of a problem. These other agencies should be getting involved and engaged in at first sign. And in many cases, they are failing to do their job.
Do you feel there's a possibility that local law enforcement may have been infiltrated the same way that the Army was, having those type of rogue elements or white supremacist elements within their ranks?
There have been evidence of that in past years. Whether that exists today or not, I couldn't say. It's possible, but I couldn't say for a fact that it's true. But in some areas of the country, I wouldn't rule that possibility out.
What do we do in that situation?
If it's proven, then you need to aggressively pursue it, and I think the full force of the law needs to come down on people who it can be proven.
I hear that. Finally, you were talking off air, and you were saying that you actually oversaw neighborhood watch type situations. Mm-hmm. Weigh in on Trayvon, this neighborhood watch situation and what your job was when you were doing, overseeing what the responsibilities of neighborhood watch captains were supposed to be adhering to.
Yeah, about 7 years or so ago, I was in neighborhood watch, in charge of the neighborhood watch program for the city. I live in a community, it's called Layton, Utah. It's about 30 miles north of Salt Lake City. And I was in charge of our neighborhood watch program. And one of the things I used to counsel people when I would go around to the community talking to them about neighborhood watch is that, A, you're not allowed to carry firearms. Firearms stay out of the mix. B, you never patrol your community alone. Always go with a partner.
So even though they were allowed to have concealed weapons, you advised them not to bring it as neighborhood watch?
Not to bring it. You are a civilian. Firearms are not part of the mix. You're not trained. Police officers are trained in firearms use and all the intricacies of how to use that gun, when to use it, when not to use it. The average citizen is not, even if you do have a permit to carry a firearm. Mm. And in Utah in particular, I was actually, the last 5 years of my career, I was in charge of the concealed firearm permit program. I actually did the investigations of people applying for those permits. I signed off on those investigations, thus authorizing the issuance of those permits. And one of the things about our permits in Utah, they are highly people highly want them because they are highly valuable in the sense that I think the last time I checked, I believe they were recognized in over 35 states.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So people want them because it's the closest thing to a national permit that exists right now.
Wow.
Okay? And
is that because they do actually get some sort of training, or
no?
It's just Utah?
No. There's no training. What you do is you pay your application fee. You fill out an application. You pay the fee. When I was still on the job, the fee was $35. I believe it's up to about $65 now.
Right.
But you fill out the application. You pay the fee. You have a background check done on you. You attend a firearms course that lasts for anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And all they do in this course is talk about gun laws.
Right.
And that's it.
Wow.
You do not have to shoot a gun. You do not have to qualify with a gun. You just attend this course.
Wow.
You take the certificate of completion from this course. You attach it to your certificate. To your application, and you go down and you submit it, and you are then blessed with a concealed firearm permit.
And so, with that lack of training, things like Trayvon can easily happen.
Yeah. I used to oversee these permits, and most of our permits at that time were from out-of-state applicants. With Missouri, Missouri was one of the biggest out-of-state applicant.
Why? Because when they get it, then it's recognized elsewhere.
It's recognized in Missouri. You can get a Utah permit and carry that permit in states like Missouri because Missouri would recognize it.
Right.
But you never had to shoot a gun at all. And
Wow.
that was one of the things our state legislature wanted. They want people to openly be able to carry a gun. So that's why a lot of out-of-state applicants were coming and applying. I once approved a permit from Travis Tritt, the country and western singer. I actually called him up on the phone and talked to him at his Nashville ranch,
Wow.
because I saw his application. My secretary happened to like him, so I called him up and spoke to him and said, "Hey, my secretary likes you. Would you mind sending her an autographed photo?" He said, "Sure."
Wow.
And then he sent that and sent a couple of CDs and so forth, and we had a nice time talking. But that's why he wanted it, because it was recognized all over, including down in Nashville.
So what do you think happened here? Putting on your law enforcement hat. What's your assessment of what's going on, especially now with the latest news that it's not going to go to a grand jury?
First of all, I think Zimmerman was wrong. I think he basically waylaid that kid. And this is just me speaking as a retired cop from what I have heard and read, with nothing more to go on. In other words, it's my opinion, nothing more,
Right.
nothing less.
Well, what about the fact, just if somebody tells you not to pursue, should one, that to me seems like he crossed the line there.
He crossed the line right there. The fact that he felt like the kid was suspicious, the whole issue of the hoodie. Heck, he was wearing a hoodie that night himself. But when he was told not to pursue, and he got out and pursued, the fact that he was armed when he wasn't supposed to be, the fact that Trayvon was in a place where he had every right to be, his father lived there, as I understand it. The whole thing just reeked from beginning to end. And then the fact that the police, again, based on what I've read, the fact that the police did not do an investigation of him when the shooting occurred. From what I understand, they did not do any ballistics tests on him. And this is just, again, information that I've been able to glean from reading the reports,
Right.
Listening to the reports. No ballistics tests were done on him as the shooter. No blood alcohol test was done on him. I haven't seen anything that says that was ever done on him, which should have been standard routine procedure.
Mm.
The whole thing was just reeks of shoddy work from a basic investigative standpoint. I could be wrong, but I haven't seen anything that points otherwise.
What does it mean when they say they're not going to have a grand jury? Is that a good or bad thing?
No, that I don't read anything into that, because the attorney, the state's attorney, has every right to not convene one if she she so chooses. That's her call, and
she can press charges, and
she can press charges without having to go through a grand jury. So I wouldn't read anything into that.
Okay.
At this point in time.
So you think he'll be arrested and charged?
Based on everything that I have seen, I have no doubt in my mind that there will be an arrest. The only question is, what kind of arrest will it be? What charge will it be?
Mm.
But I think there will be an arrest, yes.
Something to think about. You don't think they'll give him murder?
At this point in time, I don't think it'll be murder. If anything, it'll be a manslaughter. It'll be a lesser charge, if anything, because a lot of evidence has been lost because of what was failed to have been done at that time.
Wow. Well, that's something to think about. What I want to do is I'm going to take a break. We've been talking with Ron Stallworth. I had to pick your brain since you're former law enforcement. But I want to come back and talk to you about your book.
Okay.
You know, it is called Bringing the Noise. It deals with gangster reality, gangster rap. This is his area of expertise. So hold tight. We'll be right back. Want to say what's up to everybody. We're back here. We've been talking with Sergeant Ron Stallworth, formerly 32 years in law enforcement, headed up the he was the gang intelligence coordinator for the Utah Department of Public Safety's Division of Investigations. In my hand is a book that been hard to get. Now we can get it, but before, when they were there in the original form, these were books that, and they were a lot thicker, a lot thicker. These were books that many law enforcement folks had that dealt with what we now know as gangster rap. And when I've looked at these books, because you graciously gave me a couple to look at a few years ago, I was just shocked at the amount of detail and the amount of, I guess you could call, scholarship that went into them. You left very little stone unturned. If they were somebody from Ice Cube to South Central Cartel to, Spice One, you wrote about them. Not only did you have their lyrics, but you also talked, which I've found to be really insightful, about the different influences ranging from the Black Panthers to the 5% Nation to the Nation of Islam, all these different types of groups of resistance organizations and how they've informed the music. And you really went in depth in history. In this particular book, which I found to be fascinating, you talk about the connection between the Star-Spangled Banner and gangster rap. But first, let's talk a little bit about how does a guy from Utah wind up becoming the foremost authority on gangster rap? I mean, when I say foremost, testifying before Congress, the Senate, having 4 or 5 of these books, and these are things that many of your colleagues in law enforcement, really had to read and get some keen understanding of this. Is better than what most of us who are in the business know.
The way I got involved in this was, it goes all the way back to my beginnings working gangs in Utah, which started in 1988. I was working undercover. I made one of the first crack cocaine buys undercover in Utah in late '88 off of some Crips out of California. And back in that time period, I knew about the migration of Crips from South Central LA around the country. And about '88, they hit Utah. And what I did was I put a report together to my superiors in which I outlined the fact that this migration was taking place and now it has hit us and we need to be prepared for the onslaught. And in preparation for that, what I did was I contacted my colleagues from around the country. I talked to Northern California cops in terms of what did you guys do when they came from South Central up this way. And then I branched out and checked with the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington. And then I went into the interior of the country, Colorado, Kansas City, Omaha, Nebraska. And I got the same answer from everybody. Hit them hard, hit them fast, let them know they're not welcome, or else they're going to ingrain themselves in your community and you'll never get rid of the infestation. So what I did was I managed to get my law enforcement community actively engaged in addressing the problem of gangs and crack cocaine. Well, the way I got involved and connected this with the rap music was I started seeing white kids, and I put this in quote, good, clean, white Mormon kids who were expressing themselves in terms of the South Central Crip and Blood gang culture. Now, you have to try to imagine white Mormon kids, conservative kids, talking with a South Central black dialect. It's quite hilarious if you can really imagine it.
Right.
But they were talking in the dialect of kids who had grown up in South Central Cartel who quite frankly looked like you and I.
Right.
And if your back was turned to them and you heard this, you'd swear up and down that they were people that looked like you and I.
Right.
And then you turn around and you see white kids. And I would ask them, where are you from? And I would expect them, I was expecting to hear them say that they had some experience growing up in South Central L.A. or Watts, Compton or something. Then they would tell me they were from Provo, Utah, by the way, where Brigham Young University is.
Right.
Or Orem, Utah, which is right next door to Brigham Young University, or Salt Lake City, Utah. So then I would say, well, where are you learning about this culture that you're talking about? And they would say, from the rap music that we listen to. And then I said, what rap music? And they said, gangster rap. Now, at that time, and this is about 1989, I had never heard of this thing called gangster rap. It was foreign to me.
Right.
I knew about rap music.
Right.
I had heard Rapper's Delight and everything else, but I had never heard of gangster rap. And that was about the time that I started listening to gangster rap. And once I started listening to gangster rap, NWA's F the Police was the first gangster rap song I truly heard. And once I heard that song, that's when I started focusing my attention on it because it spoke to me. It was quite revealing in terms of the rage, the anger, especially as it focused on the idea of killing cops, tearing the government down, the institutions of government, the references to women as bitches and hoes and so forth. I had to explore a little bit further. So I did.
Were these white Mormon kids, were they doing more than just reciting the lyrics? Were they actually trying to emulate a lifestyle?
They were emulating the lifestyle to the fullest extent. They were carrying the blue and red rags. They were talking the talk. They were walking the walk. And it's like I used to tell my police colleagues from all over the country. Everything that was going on the streets of L.A., we were experiencing it except to a smaller degree. Our kids...
Except they were white Mormon kids.
Except they were white Mormon kids.
So white Mormon Crips and Bloods and the whole...
They were white Mormon Crips and Bloods, and then that branched out from the white Mormon kids. The Hispanic kids started adopting it. We started having Southeast Asian kids calling themselves Crips and Bloods. You name it, we had it. The only difference was it wasn't just black kids.
Okay.
Okay. The culture was being inundated throughout our socioeconomic background, our socioeconomic community, and it wasn't just the black kids that were doing it, and the influence was being spread, and it was coming from the popularity of the music.
Now, most people would have either dismissed the music or would have did something that was very cursory, just looked at it on the surface and, maybe did a lot of guessing. But you went into a lot of detail and did like serious history lessons in these books. Why such detail? Why go to the roots of this music and put it in that sort of context?
A couple of reasons. One, I wrote these books for no one's benefit but my own. I was trying to educate myself on how to be a better gang cop, and I'm the type of individual
right,
that...
I should remind people, you published these on your own.
Initially,
yeah.
I self-published on my own, yeah.
These were your own, so
yeah.
Okay.
I was trying to educate myself on how I could be a better gang cop so I could better do my job in terms of helping to better my community, and I was trying to save a few lives out there. I'm the type of person, I don't believe that necessarily throwing kids in jail is the best way to approach this problem. I believe that you should try to save as many lives as you can through an alternative approach, with jail being the last resort. So if I can understand the roots of why these kids were moving in this direction, I felt that was the best way to deal with it. But at the same time, if there was no alternative way of dealing with it, or where they were not receptive towards dealing with those alternative approaches, then by God, they got to go to jail.
Right.
So I was trying to be a better cop and to try to save a few lives. So I was trying to digest this information, and I digest things better in black and white. So that was my initial approach in writing these things. But alternatively, I was also trying to understand this because this is my past. I grew up watching on TV. I was watching Huey Newton and the boys, as I like to refer to them. I was watching what they were doing down here or up here. I was watching that on TV on the evening news. I was watching Malcolm X preaching to the fish, as he called them, when he was fishing for new recruits. I was watching that on TV growing up in El Paso, Texas. You know, I was watching Martin Luther King preaching and everything else, and leading the civil rights marches. That was my contemporary.
Right.
Okay. So when I was studying this music, I was remembering my youth, my past, and I was remembering, and basically I was putting all this history together because that was my youth, and I saw how it tied in with what I was dealing with back in the early 90s when I actually started writing this stuff. So it was very easy to put one and one together, come up with two, and piece this history together and see how it all fused and you know.
Well, one of the things I found humorous is that you looked at gangster rap and then started looking at the Star-Spangled Banner. You want to talk about that? Some of your colleagues didn't really appreciate that, but
No.
it was absolutely true, though.
Well, I have a section in there where I talk about the musical context of how there is nothing new about the violence and the imagery in gangster rap music. There's a history where you can connect the dots, so to speak. And what I did is I talked about the Star-Spangled Banner. When you talk about violence and imagery, the violent imagery of gangster rap music, let's look at violent imagery in terms of the Star-Spangled Banner. And the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air. Rockets, bombs. Okay? Now, granted, in 1776, I'm sorry, in 1812, when Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, the rockets he was talking about were not the rockets we talk about today. The bombs he was talking about were not the bombs that we talk about today. But by God, rockets and bombs are rockets and bombs.
Right.
I don't care if there is a 200-year gap. There's still rockets and bombs, and that imagery is still the same. It's destructive. So what I was talking about when I compared the two is that bombs, rockets, death, destruction is still bombs, rockets, death, and destruction. And so when I talk about that, I'm simply saying that the imagery does not change. Death, destruction, rockets, and bombs is still the same. I don't care in what context. My law enforcement colleagues, in some cases, not a lot, but there were some cases where they got upset because their interpretation was that I was trying to say that the Star-Spangled Banner had gangster rap connotations to it. I never said that, and I don't say it in my book.
But what you did do is you even took it back even further, and you talked about, you know, just the influence of music, looking at Plato and Socrates and all that. So there's this long history of using music to speak a truth to power, and there's also a long, long history of music rankling the feathers of some of those who may be a part of the establishment or in charge.
Sure. Plato even talked about the fact that music will upset the guardians, the leaders of the society and everything else. Well, it's doing that. It was doing that during the 60s when I was a teenager. We were complaining about the music of that time, the music of Dylan, of Joan Baez. We were complaining, in some circles, they were complaining about the music of James Brown. A lot of people don't remember he did a song called Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Okay? And I can remember when he said that, my contemporaries, when he said "say it loud," the next thing we did was we raised our hand, and when the Black Power fist said, "I'm black and I'm proud," okay, we were proud to proclaim our blackness with that Black Power fist, the symbol that Huey and the brothers popularized. Okay,
Right.
we were very proud to proclaim that. Okay, and a lot of people were upset by it. It was a protest song of its times. Okay, but we were proud to do that. So, you know, this is nothing new. The protest element of gangster rap music is nothing new. It's simply the way in which it is done today. Well, when I wrote this in the 90s and it carries on today, it is simply the way it is done. What the kids today have done is they've incorporated the lyrics in which they use the explicit, graphic, profane element which upsets genteel society. And that's where the controversy comes in.
You know, looking in this book, you quote a lot of folks, and you've had conversations with them over the years. Money B, Paris, Ice Cube. Talk about some of the conversations maybe with Ice Cube. Because the reason why I bring it up is we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the Rodney King Rebellion, and that put Ice Cube square center in the middle of it. People looked at his songs, Black Korea, a couple other songs, and they said, "You're the reason for the riots." You talked about in your earlier incarnations of these books that this would inevitably happen if people weren't, if your colleagues weren't careful in how they were going about engaging folks. So maybe you could talk about the meeting of these two aspects.
The riots occurred, what we in law enforcement refer to as riots, with the black community, the minority community in general, referred to as a rebellion, revolution, uprising. The significance of those terms is very important. Riots are illegal. Rebellion or revolution has a social significance to it in that there's a cause, a social cause, and in many cases a just cause in the minds of the populace.
Right.
Okay, so it's important to recognize the significance of the two terms. From my standpoint as a cop, riots are illegal. Rioters should be punished. Now, from my position as a black man,
right,
I recognize that what I saw unfolding on April 29, 1992 was a social revolution.
Okay.
Okay. Now, putting all that aside, I was attending a gang conference in Salt Lake City, and I had a sergeant from the LA Sheriff's Department, a gang sergeant, who was lecturing there, and we were actually watching the riot/revolution unfold. And I remember his reaction was, "This isn't good." And he said, "I need to get back to LA because my people are engaged in this and I need to get back." And he had to try to get a flight back there. And I remember watching that and saying to myself, this shouldn't be happening, because I was listening to songs as early as 6, 7 months or 8 months earlier, in which some of the songs were describing exactly what I was seeing unfold on TV. Okay, it wasn't a shock to me what I was watching on TV, because some of the songs I had been listening to had described in almost detail what was going on the streets. And about 4 months after the riots, I lectured at the California Gang Investigators Association conference, and I stood in front of about 1,100 cops from around the country, and I told them that no one should have been surprised about what happened that day, because it had revealed itself in the lyrics to some of the gangster rap songs that had been put out. And I had been listening to those songs, and if everyone in that audience had been listening to those songs, they would have seen the same thing that I had seen. And some of my colleagues were rather shocked by that. And then in my lecture, I told them some of the lyrics to some of those songs, and I explained to them, this is why we need to pay attention to this music. These kids are talking to us. They are telling us things, and they are revealing to us why they are unhappy, why their community is unhappy, and why they need a change, why they are advocating a change. they're speaking to us, but no one is hearing them.
Mm.
And one of the things I told them is that one of the results of the so-called riots is that it had empowered them. No longer would the social dynamic between the law enforcement community and the so-called gangster rap community or the inner city community be the same. Because when you look at the footage, one of the first things that you saw was some of the LAPD officers in the cars heading in the opposite direction from where the riots were. Why? They were outnumbered, for one thing.
Right.
They were outnumbered. They were literally overpowered. And they did the right thing, I might add, by going in the opposite direction. Okay? They did the right thing by going in the opposite direction. Had they stayed and tried to fight the rioters, they probably would not have survived.
To close out, Ron Stallworth, you can reach him at Ron Stall, RONSTALL at AOL.com. I want to thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
And sharing with us, not only your thoughts on the whole Trayvon and vigilantism, but definitely your area of expertise, gangster rap. The name of the book is Bringing the Noise, Gangster Reality, Rap, and the Dynamic of Black Social Revolution. Want to say what's up to everybody. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.